Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Hey, Dad, have you lost your spiritual gumption, your spiritual chutzpah, and you're just going through the motions as a believer and as a husband and a dad? If you have, today's episode is for you. Before we get there, let me tell you a little bit about how podcasts work. There's like a billion of them. And I don't care that Lawson and I become famous, although I would love to have my own bobblehead. Like, that would be the coolest. Like, if we get to where the podcast is so famous where we can have our own bobbleheads, okay, we're just going to shut it down at that point, because we will have arrived. There's nothing north of that. There's nothing better than that, than our own bobbleheads. But aside from that, in all honesty, I don't care to self-promote me or Lawson. I do want to reach as many dads as we possibly can with the show. And right now, our stats would tell us we're going to reach about 100,000 dads.
Wow, that's incredible.
This year, which is crazy, but we'd love to reach 100 million. So here's how that happens. You leave us a review. You rate the show, you review the show on Apple iTunes or on Spotify, something like that. Leave us a review. We'll even take a 1-star review. But we got recently a 5-star review from a gentleman. We think his name is Damon. He's got some kind of clever spelling on iTunes. Lawson, what'd you notice in that review?
Yeah, this was super cool because it hits the point of what what we began, set out to do over 2 years ago. And so check this out. Here's what he writes. As a married husband, dad, coach, mentor, etc. to my family, being in a deep valley at the current moment has been made so much more comforting with the presence of God and the scripture, words, and encouragement through this podcast. That right there would be cool. Like the subtitle, the subhead for Father on Purpose. And then like, right, what result, have we always prayed God would do? So Damon, thank you so much. And yeah, I want feedback. There is also a way to give feedback and input, and join the show. You can go to the website and hit record. There's a button there. It's really easy to find. And as soon as you do, we get an email with that audio recording. We've had some on the show, and frankly, we've built some shows around individual dads that have sent us, their thoughts. So keep that stuff coming. And, you said 100,000, I just can't, that's just crazy, but 100 million. Absolutely. And, the way we're going to get there is not you and me. It is through God working among the audience and saying one guy to another, hey, I heard this and I think it helped me, and I think it helped you.
So today we're continuing our series through the book of Romans chapter 12. And we are at the part of Romans chapter 12, verses 11 through 13. Let me read those to you, Dad, and then we're going to dive in. Verse 11, never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Verse 12, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. So we've got Paul here after the stretch on spiritual gifts, which we talked about last week. He's kind of like doing this rapid fire in these few verses of several things he really wants to encourage the Romans to do. Don't be lacking in zeal, keep your fervor, serve the Lord, be joyful in hope. And he's kind of listing these off. Were there a couple or one maybe, Lawson, that jumped out at you that you either felt was really cool and wanted to talk about, or was one that you felt maybe convicted by?
Well, you know me, I took it apart and thought through in over analytical, overthinking fashion, as I always do. And I also thought back to your what you taught me, the OIA. And like I took a moment and thought, what is the message here? What are we picked these three out that go together. And like we've talked about in Romans 12, there's a succession. Paul is unpacking some thoughts for us. And so I'll break some of that down, but I started with observe, then interpret, then application. And in the doing of that, writing it down, I came back and just kind of read all three again, like all together, and thought, okay, so this is my grandmother, is what is being described. Both of them. That's actually awesome. Yeah,
really.
And I'll tell you why as we go, but it was really cool. It brought back some memories of childhood. My childhood was a kind of a mixture of different things, but during the summers, because both parents worked, I would spend weeks and weeks, like the whole summer, as a 12-year-old through probably 16, 17-year-old before I could go get an actual job. My grandmother and grandfather had a thousands of acre farm that he leased out. And so there was just always work to do. And I loved being out there. There was woods and creeks and ponds and farmland. And, I made some good friends who were about my age that worked on the farm as well. And so I loved being out there with them. And there was a little Macedonia Baptist church about 3-4 miles down the dirt road. And it was just full of the kindest, most grounded, down-to-earth people. My grandmother, my mom's mom, being one of them. And she taught me a lot. And so in going back and reading this through and breaking it down, it starts with having some passion. The words zeal and fervor both have a synonym of passion. So be passionate about serving the Lord. The second is be joyful in hope and patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. That was her. And then the last one, really, I think that's what sparked my memory and kind of brought my heart back to thinking about her, was share with the Lord's people who are in need and practice hospitality. It was nothing for somebody to just knock on the door and be there, ready to hang out and sit around under the porch and talk, or they'd bring food. And some of the best meals of my life were in the rec area building of this little church, where everybody would bring food. It was fresh farm food, and oh my gosh, just the best Southern
I'm getting
cooking.
Hungry.
Yeah,
I'm getting hungry listening to
and
this.
everybody was like, everybody wanted everybody to be well and share openly. So anyway, that's, for some reason, that's what God kind of put on my heart, taking these three verses. And so I would underscore a few things. I'll turn it back to you. Passion for serving the Lord. Number one, be joyful, patient, and faithful, and then share and practice hospitality. Unfortunately, I don't know what to make of this, but unfortunately, I think we tend to be isolated in some ways, more so now, and that is a shame. I got a lot out of just deep, meaningful talks, because there wasn't a TV on. We only had 3 channels, and there wasn't social media. And, so you've got to maybe work at that a little more now than it just, I think it just came naturally because there wasn't anything else to do, back then. So anyway, and maybe you can help break down in the various pieces, some of how, there are key words. Paul uses specific words, and I always think like, all right, so who's the audience and what words have been chosen? And I think there's real meaning and value that you can get out of that. And I think as we do that, Dad, keep in mind your family, keep in mind your kids. Who does this remind you of? Who it reminded me of my grandmother, mothers, plural. Who does it remind you of? And how do we How do we be this? How do we embody this message to our kids and our wife?
Yeah, I remember one time, Lawson, I saw Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A, speaking at an event. And at the time I saw him speaking, he was in his, I don't know, 80s. And so he was talking a long time ago, and that was at least 10 or 15 years ago. And he's now passed on, of course. And he said, you kids talk about being bored these days. When I was a kid, the only thing I had to play with was a loose tooth. It was hilarious. Oh, that was so funny. And so the other thing I want to remind guys of, that some dad listening is hearing us say the word fervor, and he keeps thinking like it's a favor. Like, would you please do me a fervor? But no, it's not. It's not do me a favor or fervor. It's passion. It's zeal. It's like, what would people describe you as being passionate about? Mm-hmm. So kind of forget the, Christianity for a moment, forget your faith. If I just walked up to your family and I said, hey, to your spouse, what is your husband passionate about? What is a subject or a topic or something he's passionate about? And I would love for the guy listening to this to just play that through a filter right now, or feel free to hit pause on the podcast. Go walk up to your wife and play the last 10 seconds and just surprise yourself with her answer. What are the top couple things that your husband, or if I were to go to your children and, the older ones that can think and talk, and I would say, hey, what is your dad passionate about? And one of the very first things that I would love for my family to say about me, which I'm not entirely sure they would, but I would love for them to say that I'm passionate about my faith. I'm passionate about Jesus. I'm passionate about the word of God. I'm passionate about those things. Man, I'd love it if that were their answer or part of their answer. I would love it if they said, I'm passionate about loving my wife. Like if that came out and was obvious that I'm really passionate about loving my wife. And it doesn't necessarily mean like crazy with my hair on fire. It just means that there's a fire burning inside that causes me to serve her well and to love her and put her needs above mine. And that'd be awesome. Or what if they were to say, man, he's really passionate about his family. He's really passionate about time with his kids. Golly, that would be so great if those were the answers that my family would give. And I just want to challenge the dad listening. What would your family say? What would they say you're passionate about? And they may say, your sports team or something else. And it's not necessarily evil or wrong, unless you're an Alabama fan, in which case, no, I'm just kidding. I'm trying to get a rise out of Lawson because he's going to start singing the University of Georgia fight song in a second. I think it's important for us to realize that often zeal and passion is detected. It's detected. You may paint your face. I remember senior year of college, we got our last few tickets to UK basketball, and I literally did paint my face. I had a giant basketball. I cut a hole in it. I put it on my head. I think I was on TV at one point, and the basketball was blue and white. And so, I went to my last few UK basketball games in style as a student at the University of Kentucky. So yeah, that's obvious. Sometimes your passion looks obvious and you can even see it from a distance. But the things of God, the things that we're supposed to be passionate about in this stretch of Romans, you see those through your behavior. You see those through your attitude. You see those through what makes you angry. You see those through what makes you excited. And so the question for us, I think, as dads, in part, as we read this particular stretch of Romans, is what are we passionate about? And have we lost some of that passion for the Lord? And then what I find interesting on that, Lawson, is right on the heels of that passion and fervor and zeal conversation in verse 11, Paul goes into being joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. It's almost like, hey, let's get your passions straight. Let's make sure that you are fervently after the things of God. And as long as that, Lego brick is in place, on top of that, we're going to stack, joy and patience and faithfulness. And he continues on. What do you think are some of those relationships, Lawson, between these ideas?
I hadn't thought of it like that. You're right. You said a burning fire. Part of the definition that I found online for fervor, great warmth and intensity of emotion, intense heat, and then heat or warmth. So that's super interesting that goes along with passion. Also, enthusiastic devotion to a cause. Like you said, it's like unmissable. If it's enthusiastic devotion, people can see that. What I also observe is that there is no ulterior motive listed. There's no, I didn't observe a statement saying, do this in order to whatever, produce a result, or do this so that XYZ cause is affected. This is almost like a mission statement, sort of, for how we can live so that people would be drawn to God. And so, yeah, like having an enthusiastic devotion to what he's describing here, serving the Lord. I think that can be at work. It doesn't have to be, making a potluck like I talked about in that old church out in the middle of the woods. But that was certainly the case. They were, having that as their kind of core reason for getting together, was serving each other and inviting people in that maybe didn't come to church and wanting to develop a relationship with them. But I think serving the Lord can happen in all kinds of ways in every place that we go. The kind of the mission that I'm hearing from this is he wants people to be drawn to him, and we can be attractive by following this protocol. And what I mean is, think about the things that we just went through. What they're describing, to what he's describing in a way is, man, that sounds like somebody that people like. Having an enthusiastic devotion to this cause of serving, being joyful, being patient, being faithful, sharing openly, being very hospitable. That is a very likable person. It is someone that people want to be around and would listen to, and would be able to probably establish a trusting relationship with a whole lot of people. So I think there is a crucial message within these 3 verses of Romans 12. And I want to ask, what does it mean as a dad? What is this? If you are that person, what does that look like to our kids? It may be that it looks to them something because they see it in you coming directly at them, but it also could be them observing how we are to their mom, or how we are, to strangers, or other people, outside the immediate family. I was, maybe we come back to this if you want, Kim, but I was reminded recently when I saw a friend, we were traveling together, and I was reminded of this. Like, you can tell a lot by a person by the way they treat a stranger, especially, I think, the way they treat like a server at a restaurant, or in this case, I was traveling together and I saw how my buddy interacted with the bell desk guy. And then later on, same day, later on, how we played golf as a part of this work thing. And I noticed how he was to the golf attendant after we finished our round. Okay. This dude's afternoon is spent, people pull up in their golf cart and get out, and he takes the cart, he cleans the clubs up a little bit. There's usually trash all throughout the golf cart, and so that person's role is to get you on your way, and then they clean up the mess. And I watched my buddy just strike up a genuine conversation with him as the dude was wiping off our clubs and just kind of asking how the day went and that sort of thing. I mean, he went, but it was so genuine. Like, when someone is doing this, like if someone is to be a Romans 12, 11 through 13 person for an ulterior motive, you could spot that a mile away. But just being a genuine person who is interested in the other, I think is the kind of crux of what Paul is relaying to us through this. I'm going to call it a mission statement.
I like that. I like the way to look at it that way. I was at an event this past weekend with one of our ministry friends, Chris Harper from Better Man, and he gave a keynote presentation. And one of the things that you observe immediately when Chris speaks is his level of passion about the subject. He never seems to talk. We even went to dinner the night before, and even at dinner, when he tells stories, he's so passionate. Mm-hmm. Like it's like and it's magnetic. Mm-hmm. I think to your point about being likable, it's magnetic. It draws people to him as a leader and as just an idea purveyor of ideas. Except for some of his fanciness, what he fancies about 90s hip hop. He's just a little overboard on that front, like whatever, Chris. But in the things that matter, in the things that are significant and eternal, he really is a very passionate guy. And it is, to your point, is very magnetic. And these commands we get in verse 12, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. These are things that in some ways are like themes that we see in the New Testament, that there's this hope, right? Hope is this thing we see off in the distance, and that we are supposed to put our trust and our excitement in that thing, that far off day, that the fact that we know in the end, God wins. In the end, we go to heaven. In the end, we get to spend eternity with the Lord. And that's the hope that we have. That's the hope that we have deep inside of us that should be a subject of rejoicing. That should be something that each and every day we should be rejoiceful and excited about that hope, or being patient in tribulation. I'm thinking of the book of James, where it's like, we have trials, and these trials produce in us certain things, and that we've got to learn how to be patient in tribulation. My wife and I were out for a walk last night, and we were just talking about how there's some challenges we currently have in our life that we're walking through, and we're both trying to be patient in this tribulation, and be able to walk through it. And not necessarily because, it's all going to work out or it's all going to be great one day. It may not. Who knows? We don't know how it ends. But what we do know is that God calls us to be patient in the tribulation, and kind of wrapping up that verse 12, being constant in prayer, being constant in prayer. And I think of the other times in scripture when when Paul talks about, pray continually, pray without ceasing, whatever problem we're having, lift those requests up to God with thanksgiving. And these are like a spine. I like the mission statement idea. They're like this idea that if we're walking in these topics, and our attitude, our mindset is set this way, we're going to be able to serve the Lord more effectively, as it says in verse 11. And then there's this capstone here in 13, and we'll transition next week to some other topics. But let's talk a little bit, Lawson, about contributing to the needs of the saints and seeking to show hospitality. What does that look like in either your life or in the life of someone who's helped you? I can tell you that I have a friend who is, I would call him a consummate gift giver. He is really good at picking out gifts that are a blessing to me. And usually they're pretty clever. They're off the beaten path. There's something I wouldn't get for myself. There's something that sometimes is a little bit pricey, and I feel like, whoa, you might have spent too much on that, but really good gift giver. And then when I think of the word hospitality, I immediately think of my wife, April. I don't think I could count the number of people who have been in our home in the last, 27 years as a married couple. It's gotta be in the thousands. Like, it's gotta be. From parties to events to birthdays to, baptisms, you name it, to teas. My wife will host a tea with 7 or 8 ladies. Super cool. Just over and over and over again, there are people in our home, and I probably wouldn't be the guy driving all that as much as she is always giving of her time and her capacity to host people. And what I try to do, she has already figured this out, but if she's having a lady over for tea at 2:00 in the afternoon, then what I try to do is kind of like hover around the kitchen around 1:00, because there's going to be like treats galore. There's going to be like, charcuterie trays with cheese and strawberries and grapes and crackers. And then I'm like picking them off, and I'm trying to, like, last week I tried to grab a strawberry off the plate, and I tried to grab, like, strategically the right strawberry so you couldn't tell any were missing. And then it kind of tumbled down like a house of cards. And I'm like trying to put them back, so she wouldn't notice. But my wife is doing that all the time, man. You talk about practicing hospitality. That's April Evans big time.
I like that thought. Yeah. On the heels of 11, 12, 13 are right on the heels of 11, or excuse me, 10, that says, be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourself. Remember, we talked about that last time. And I think hospitality is the physical example of that. It doesn't have to be, a tea or someone's birthday party necessarily. Those are obviously a really nice way of doing it. But I think have you ever been the recipient of a random act of kindness? I think hospitality can manifest itself through us in ways that aren't necessarily planned. It can be my buddy that was talking it up to the guy, who was cleaning his clubs, and then, he gave him a tip, but the tip was beside the point. I think what he did was he showed respect, and he showed that he was genuinely interested in someone who, in some cases, may be the person who gets just kind of passed by. We've had a saying in our household: look for the overlooked. And I've been proud in the past when one of the girls, showed that in their actions. And although there's certainly not to be selfish about it, but it is deeply rewarding to be hospitable. And I think there's a loop here that is being referenced where Paul says, be joyful. And there are other scriptures that support that. Let's see here. Philippians 4:4, rejoice in the Lord always. Say it again, rejoice. Serve the Lord. Psalm 100 verse 2, serve the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with singing. And so passion is contagious, like you mentioned. I think joy is contagious. And those two things coming together through the physical form of the physical act of being hospitable to someone. It doesn't have to be putting on a birthday party for someone. It can just be in a kind word or a smile, when you check in at the hotel, or when you're filling the gas up, when you go in to pay the attendant behind the cash register. Being hospitable is not necessarily a start to finish, 2:00 birthday party. It's a mindset, and it's a way we interact.
What's interesting? Jesus said in John 15, he said, no longer do I call you slaves. The slave doesn't know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. And that word friends is the same root word that we see for hospitality. And so there's the word friends, you add some things, you get to the word for hospitality used here in Romans 12. So part of what the definition of hospitality would have been is be like a friend to people. Be like a friend. So hospitality doesn't necessarily mean hosting someone at your house. It could be that person that you hold the door open for at the restaurant. It could be, I remember one time, our pastor, I walk into a post office late at night, and it's after the post office is like officially closed, but there's that self-mailing area where you can go in and still transact it. You just hit the buttons and put the money into the machine. And I walk into this little room, and I see my pastor, Dave, and I go, hey, Dave, how you doing? He goes, great. And just as I walked in, he's like patting his pants pockets, and he's like patting his shirt. And I'm like, what's up, man? And he goes, I don't have my wallet.
Dude, he saw you parking. He saw you coming.
Bro. So I walk in and I go, really? And he goes, yeah. And I go, well, how much is your postage? And he goes, it's like $5. And I'm like, bro, I got you. Don't worry about it. And so I put in the card and we pay, and he goes on. Well, later I saw him a couple months later, and he tried to hand me a $5 bill. And I was like, Dave, seriously, like, it's a small thing, man. Let me just do you this favor. And he said, no, it's you take it. I'm like, no. So I didn't take it. Well, several months later, I was walking into a restaurant with another friend, and my other friend was about 6 steps ahead of me. So my other friend goes in. I open the door. In between the two of us, I see my pastor again, Dave. And he goes, oh, hey, Kent, how you doing? And he walks out. I get inside the restaurant, and my friend is holding a $5
No
bill.
way. Good for him.
and he goes, hey, that guy walking out said to give this to you. The whole time I was like, golly, man, I'm trying to give the dude a $5 blessing,
Right.
and he won't even take it. But even that, right? Just, can we be hospitable? Can we be friendly? Can we lean into those relationships around us and just ask, hey man, how you doing? That's a measure of hospitality.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, something unexpected for your kid, like birthdays and Valentine's days and Christmas, gifts are going to come with no surprise, really. Like it's part of the deal. It's kind of expected, but the smallest thing in an unexpected moment, maybe it's a note card, maybe it's just leaving an unexpected, nice little note card. In fact, I think what I'm going to do, I leave in the morning when we're done. I think I'm going to write Audrey a little note and
good idea.
Be ready and leave it so that I'll be gone by the time she's up and at it. Over by the coffee maker, like a small gift like that. And then knowing her, she'll talk about it. My daughters hear that. And, it's like this, not for me, but I want to model this, this thought process behind what Paul is calling us in his mission statement. And then take that with me on my trip and see where can I find. In fact, this time next week when we're recording again, ask me. I'm gonna make it a mission that as I go on this, this journey that I'm about to head out on for work, how often can I be passionate about serving the Lord with joy and faithfulness and being a person that is hospitable to others. I'm saluting Paul. I hear you. Mission statement straight from God. I'm on it, and I'm going to do my best this coming weekend. Maybe other dads can jump on the bandwagon.
Well, I think this stretch is a super easy stretch for us to bring up with our kids and just kind of ask them these, because they're also practical. The pieces of this puzzle in Romans 12 verses 11,
True.
12, and 13 are super practical. We can ask our kids, man, what am I passionate about? And I'm going to try that, with my own family before they hear this podcast. I'm going to ask them, or ask our family members, are you rejoicing in hope? What kind of hope do you have? What kind of patience are you exhibiting in tribulation? Or are you in prayer? Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. We can ask our kids, what's that look like? Because we'd love for our kids to be living out of this identity where they are not slothful, right? As verse 11 in some translations would say, do not be slothful in zeal. Do not be slothful in zeal. Don't be lazy. Don't be lazy about your faith. Don't be lazy about your passion, but be fervent in spirit. And, the good news and the bad news about this topic, is that our kids and our family will probably pick up whatever we are. Right. So that is both the good news and the bad news. Is if we are fervent about our faith and we're passionate, that fire is probably going to catch to some degree. And if we're, damp and down and sad and not engaged in spiritual things, our family's probably going to pick that up too. And some seasons are easier than others. Granted, a dad may be hearing this right now, and it's hard to be zealous and passionate and fervent right now because, man, just life is on top of you. Being a dad can be heavy. By the same token, we're still commanded to do it. We're still told we need to do it. We need to rejoice in that and be patient in tribulation. So, Dad, that's what Lawson and I would love to leave you with today is talk about this stuff with your kids. Talk about it with your family. And above all, model it. Be that example as Paul's talking about. Do not be slothful in zeal, but fervent in spirit. And as always, if there's any way we can help you, reach out to us. info@manhoodjourney.org. Go to manhoodjourney.org. Find us online. You can get in touch with us, and we would love to serve you if there's any way that we can. So, Dad, thanks for hanging out with us this week. We hope today's podcast has been a blessing to you. Lawson, thank you as always, my friend.
Buddy boy. Good to see you.
I will see you next week, and whoever's listening, take care. Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful Remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call a person up and tell them to listen in. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.